I still remember my grandmother's house, the scent of polish and warm wood, the gentle hum of her old radio on Saturday mornings. Even at 8, I noticed how every cup, chair, and trinket had its place, yet the home never felt stiff or like a museum. One of the most comforting things was how naturally she moved through her space, tidying without thinking, adjusting a napkin here, straightening a vase there, as if the house itself breathed with her. Now, decades later, as I walk through my own home, I see the echoes of her habits. After 60, something subtle happens. You notice how clutter creeps in and weighs on your mind. The goal is to feel light, to move freely through your space, and sometimes I forget how much these little rules kept life gentle, safe, and calm. Even a cleared tabletop instantly changed the energy, and a neatly folded tablecloth made the whole morning feel easier and happier. Here's the secret she never spoke aloud. It wasn't about perfection, it was about flow, giving the house room to breathe, just as we need to breathe as we age. Today, I want to share the 10 little rules she lived by, the ones that quietly prevented clutter and made her home a sanctuary. By the end, you might recognize a few in your own home, or feel inspired to bring them back. Rule 1. Everything returns to its place. Grandmother always said, "A thing without a home soon makes a mess," and I only fully understood what she meant years later. Every spoon, brush, teacup, and even the tiniest salt shaker had a spot, a place where it belonged naturally, like it had been waiting there all along. One of the most striking things about her house was how nothing ever felt lost, not because she had more things than anyone else, but because each item had a quiet rhythm in its life. If it didn't belong somewhere, it simply didn't belong anywhere, and she showed me that clutter isn't just physical, it's the way a space feels when the flow is broken. I remember standing beside her at the sink, scrubbing a plate while she guided my small hands to put each dish back exactly where it had come from. No shortcuts, no piling in corners or drawers. She would say, "See, even the sugar spoon has a home," and I would slide it back into its tiny groove in the silverware tray, feeling a kind of small triumph I can still picture decades later. The goal is not perfection, she would smile, but a space that feels gentle and light the moment you step into it. As we age, something subtle happens. Our energy and attention become more precious, and having a place for everything can instantly make a home feel calm, safe, and welcoming without even thinking about it. Here's the secret. Order doesn't have to be rigid or stark. A spoon in its groove, a cup in its cabinet, a brush in its holder. They create a rhythm that your mind picks up on, a quiet reassurance that everything is in its place. Even after 60, when knees ache and bending feels heavier, the act of returning a small item can feel grounding, like sending a message to yourself that the home is still your sanctuary. I found that applying this one rule naturally taught me respect for each little thing, and the calm it brought was almost tangible. You could feel it in the air, in the smooth tabletop, in the way sunlight hit the neatly stacked plates. Instantly, the room felt lighter, and the small habit, practiced without thinking, became one of the most enduring gifts she ever gave me. Rule 2. The nightly sweep. Every evening after supper, she would take a soft cloth and move quietly through the house, tidying anything left out. Letters stacked on the sideboard, a teacup forgotten on the table, stray knitting needles spilling from the basket. At first, I thought it was fussiness, a habit of someone who cared too much about small things, but over time, I noticed how the house greeted us the next morning, calm, orderly, almost like it had been cared for while we slept. One of the most comforting parts was how naturally she moved, smoothing a tablecloth here, aligning a chair there, never rushing, never making it feel like a chore, just the gentle rhythm of the day winding down. The goal was simple, a home that feels soft, welcoming, and ready to support whatever the next day might bring. As we age, something subtle happens. Our energy dips, our attention scatters, and even small messes can weigh on our minds. Her nightly sweep kept that weight from accumulating, making mornings feel lighter and calmer without thinking twice about it. I remember joining her sometimes, cloth in hand, noticing how instantly the room seemed more peaceful, the air softer, and even the sunlight across the polished surfaces felt warmer, more inviting. Here's the secret. She wasn't tidying for show or pride. Every gentle swipe, every realignment of objects, was her way of gifting the next day, soft, calm, and easier. After 60, bending and reaching can feel tiring, but taking 15 minutes each evening to smooth counters, align cups, or straighten a small stack of letters can transform how a home feels. Without thinking, I began to follow her rhythm in my own space, and the quiet satisfaction lingered, a reminder that order brings peace and that tomorrow can be gentler, softer, and infinitely more inviting. Rule 3. One item in, one item out. I remember the rule clearly. If a new item arrived, a teacup from an aunt, a small trinket from a neighbor, one had to leave. Not thrown away carelessly, but given to someone who could treasure it, passed along like a quiet blessing. As a child, I hated it. How could anything leave? Every piece felt sacred, every object a part of our story, and the idea of letting it go made my chest tighten. But over time, I realized she was teaching us something far deeper. To cherish what we keep, not cling to everything that passes through our hands. The goal is subtle, yet powerful. One of the most striking things I noticed as I grew older was how naturally she made space feel like abundance. A shelf with a single porcelain cup didn't feel empty. It felt respected, appreciated, honored. Each item in the home had room to breathe, to be seen and touched without competing with clutter. As we age, something subtle happens. Our homes start to carry decades of memories, and suddenly every corner feels heavy. That's when this rule shows its quiet magic. Here's the secret. Applying it doesn't mean losing memory or joy. After 60, when storing and handling items can feel tiring, the practice of pairing every new thing with something to leave behind keeps the home lighter, the movement freer, and the energy calmer. I found myself naturally selecting which items truly mattered, photographing special things before passing them on, and watching how instantly the room felt more open. Space became a gift, and even a small shelf with fewer objects radiated abundance and care. Less really can feel like more, and this gentle rhythm of giving and receiving taught me that letting go is part of treasuring what remains. Rule 4. Daily paper patrol. Every morning, the day's mail arrived, crisp and full of little promises, and she had a small basket waiting just for it. Letters, bills, invitations. None of it was left to pile up, and by evening, each piece had been opened, sorted, and placed where it belonged. I remember sitting beside her, a little stool pulled close, learning to separate the important from the trivial, to tuck a bill into its folder, slide a letter into the to-answer pile, and gently file away invitations for upcoming gatherings. One of the most subtle lessons I learned was that the clutter of papers is invisible until it stops you in your tracks. She made it vanish without fuss, without thinking, simply by giving each sheet its moment in the day. The goal is simple. Keep the flow moving so life doesn't feel heavy. As we age, something subtle happens. Papers, reminders, notes, and cards begin to accumulate, and suddenly even small piles can feel overwhelming, creating tension in the home. She taught me that 15 minutes of attention, once a day, could transform a space. The basket became a ritual, a pause with a cup of tea, a quiet time to touch every piece, decide its place, and release what wasn't needed. Even after 60, I still feel that instant relief when the mail is sorted, the surface clear, and the counters calm. Here's the secret. The daily paper patrol isn't about perfection, it's about rhythm. Without piling, without clutter, every day begins with order and ease. A tidy surface, an empty basket at night, and the gentle satisfaction of knowing everything has its place brings a small, continuous sense of control and peace. Over time, I realized that this simple habit didn't just manage papers. It protected the calm of the home, making each day feel lighter, smoother, and infinitely more welcoming. Rule 5. The memory shelf. She had a small shelf tucked into the corner of the living room, the kind that barely caught your eye but instantly drew attention when you looked closer. A few porcelain animals, a framed photograph, a silver locket, each carefully chosen, each given space to breathe. Only what truly mattered got a place there. I remember staring at that shelf as a child, tracing the edges of the little objects, feeling the stories they held without ever touching them too roughly. One of the most profound things I realized was how the shelf never overflowed. It wasn't meant to display everything, just the treasures that deserved quiet attention. The goal was simple but powerful. Memories live in hearts, not piles. As we age, something subtle happens. Our homes start to feel crowded with decades of keepsakes, and the line between cherished and cluttered blurs. She taught me that focus transforms nostalgia into peace. I learned to curate gently, selecting a few meaningful objects for display, arranging them naturally with space between, so light could fall on each item and the room felt calm, not crowded. After 60, even small displays can shift the energy of a room, making it instantly warmer, softer, more inviting. Here's the secret. The memory shelf isn't about quantity, it's about reverence. Without thinking, I began creating my own little corners, letting only the items that truly resonated take a place of honor. Seeing a single photograph or tiny figurine on a cleared shelf brings a sense of balance and calm, a quiet heartbeat of the home. The lesson lingered. Nostalgia doesn't need clutter. It needs focus, respect, and the gentle pleasure of knowing that every object left out has space to shine, and every memory has room to live in the heart. Rule 6. Guest room readiness. Even when no one was visiting, the guest room was always neat, the sheets tucked perfectly under the mattress, the curtains drawn just so, and the small bedside table arranged with a lamp and a fresh coaster. She called it her daily hospitality, a quiet ritual that spoke of care without needing an audience. I remember following her in as a child, straightening pillows and sweeping the floor alongside her, feeling the weight of her attention to detail in every corner. One of the most comforting lessons was how naturally she made the room ready, not for show, but so that the house itself felt prepared to welcome life at any moment. The goal was subtle but profound, a home that anticipates kindness even when no one is watching. As we age, something subtle happens, our energy for upkeep wanes, and even small tasks can feel like a burden. But she taught me that spending just a few minutes each day, smoothing sheets, aligning pillows, or drawing back the curtains, instantly transforms a room into a space that feels alive and ready. After 60, these little gestures matter even more. They create a sense of calm and assurance, a home that supports comfort, safety, and warmth without asking for attention. Here's the secret. Guest room readiness isn't about impressing others. Without thinking, I adopted her rhythm in my own space, noticing how the act of caring for the room cared for me in return. A tidy bed, a clear floor, a little vase of flowers instantly shifts the energy, making the home feel soft, inviting, and calm. Living in a space that anticipates your needs teaches a quiet kind of respect, a subtle joy that lingers throughout the day, and reminds you that a home isn't just walls and furniture, it's a sanctuary that nurtures, even in the smallest, simplest ways. Rule 7. Kitchen items in use. Special china and silver weren't left hidden in cabinets forever. Sundays, holidays, or even a surprise guest meant these items were brought out, polished, admired, and used with care before being returned to their rightful places. I remember standing on a small stool beside her, watching her set the table just so, noticing how each dish caught the sunlight and seemed to glow with its own story. One of the most profound lessons I absorbed was how naturally she taught that objects exist to be lived with, not stared at or hoarded away. The goal is simple yet transformative. A dish gains its story when it's used, creating memories in motion rather than memories stuck in boxes. As we age, something subtle happens. Fear of damaging items or making a mess can keep us from enjoying what we own, and slowly, clutter builds behind that hesitation. After 60, the rhythm of using, admiring, and returning teaches respect for objects without suffocating them in storage. Here's the secret. When I began bringing my own cherished dishes out for daily use, even a quiet Sunday breakfast felt richer, warmer, instantly more alive. Without thinking, I found joy in the shine of a plate, the gentle clink of cutlery, and the small ritual of caring for and using what I loved. Clutter hides behind the fear of use, but life grows fuller when we honor objects by engaging with them. Polishing the silver, laying the linen napkins, arranging the centerpiece. All of these small, intentional movements create a kitchen that feels lived in, calm, and full of warmth. It isn't about perfection. It's about presence, about giving each object its moment to shine and allowing ourselves to savor it. Over time, I realized that a well-used kitchen instantly communicates care, history, and love, quietly shaping the atmosphere of the home and reminding me that the life we live with our things is far richer than the life we save them for. Rule 8. Weekly walkthrough. Every Saturday morning, she would slowly move through the house, starting with the living room, pausing by the windows to wipe away any dust that had settled overnight, adjusting cushions just so, then moving on to the bedrooms and kitchen. Nothing huge, nothing rushed, just gentle care, a soft rhythm that felt almost like a quiet conversation with the home itself. I remember trailing behind her, hand on the small feather duster, noticing how one careful movement could instantly make a room feel lighter, warmer, and more welcoming. One of the most powerful lessons she taught me was how naturally consistency beats urgency. Small, steady habits keep a lifetime of clutter at bay. The goal is subtle but transformative. A home maintained gently over time feels alive, cared for, and safe. As we age, something subtle happens. Our energy wanes, and it becomes tempting to let chores pile up, thinking there's always tomorrow. After 60, even a short, mindful hour of walking through the rooms, dusting, straightening, and realigning a few items can shift the atmosphere completely. Here's the secret. Without thinking, I began adopting her pace, noticing how a single sweep over the bookshelf or gentle straighten of curtains instantly created calm. Maintenance may be quiet, invisible, almost unnoticed, but it is powerful. I learned to appreciate the soft satisfaction of knowing every corner has been touched, every surface acknowledged, and that the home quietly breathes with care. A weekly walkthrough doesn't just preserve order, it preserves peace, gently reminding you that a tidy home isn't about perfection or pressure. It's about living in a space that supports you, nurtures you, and carries the rhythm of life forward naturally, day by day. Rule 9. Letting gifts find homes. A gift she received never lingered unopened or forgotten in a drawer. If it wasn't meant for her, she would quietly pass it along to a friend, a neighbor, or a family member who would treasure it. I remember sitting beside her as she wrapped a small scarf she hadn't worn and tucked a note inside before sending it to my aunt. One of the most lasting lessons I learned was how naturally she taught that every item has its true home, and our joy grows when we let it travel there. The goal is simple yet profound. Objects are bridges between people, not weights in your hands. As we age, something subtle happens. Sentiment and guilt can make us cling to things, and slowly, the clutter grows. After 60, I see how much lighter a home feels when you release items with care, when you pass along a gift with gratitude rather than hoarding it out of obligation. Here's the secret. Without thinking, I began noticing how the simple act of sharing created warmth, connection, and calm in both the giver and the receiver, making the home instantly feel alive and meaningful. She showed me that objects carry stories, but the stories don't have to trap us. They live in hearts and memories, not in stacks of things gathering dust. I remember the soft pleasure of seeing a neighbor's eyes light up over something that had been sitting in our cupboard, and how instantly the room felt calmer, the air lighter, and the space more alive. Letting gifts find their homes teaches respect, for the object, for yourself, and for the people around you. It's a gentle rhythm that transforms the home into a place of movement, connection, and quiet joy, where nothing lingers out of obligation, and every item breathes with purpose, care, and love. Rule 10. Touching each decade. Once a month, she would sit with old boxes, letters tied with ribbons, photographs faded at the edges, birthday cards yellowed with time. She touched each item carefully, smiling at some memories, sighing at others, and thoughtfully deciding which treasures would find a place on display. One of the most striking things I remember is how naturally she moved through the decades, letting each object speak without rushing or forcing a decision. The goal is not to discard quickly but to honor the life each item represents, and to recognize the life you've lived alongside it. It was slow, tender work, and I learned by watching. After 60, something subtle happens. You start to see your own memories differently, noticing what truly matters and what can quietly move on. She never threw anything carelessly. Every selection was deliberate, like arranging flowers so that each bloom could shine. Instantly, I understood that attention and care make a home feel alive, gentle, and safe, even when it holds decades of memories. Here's the secret. A home full of nostalgia doesn't need to be crowded or chaotic. One carefully chosen display of ribbons, a stack of letters, a photograph in a silver frame. These small touches create warmth, connection, and calm. As we age, clutter can sneak in when sentiment overtakes selectivity, but by touching each decade with love, we honor our past without letting it weigh us down. Watching her, I realized that memories live in moments, in stories told at the table, in laughter shared, not in piles gathering dust. By treating each object with reverence and purpose, the house becomes a sanctuary, a gentle reflection of the life that built it, and a space where every day feels tender, mindful, and beautifully remembered. Looking back, her house wasn't perfect. It was lived in, full of the soft sounds of life and the faint scent of polish that clung to the woodwork. One of the most comforting lessons I inherited wasn't about furniture or dishes, but a way of living that honored memory without letting it weigh us down. Each of her little rules, returning items to their place, the nightly sweep, touching each decade with care, kept life gentle, calm, and unhurried. Instantly, I realized that a home doesn't need to sparkle to feel safe and nurturing. It just needs intention, rhythm, and tender attention to the small things that make it ours. Maybe your drawers and shelves are full, maybe decades of objects crowd every surface, but here's the secret: a few quiet habits can transform the space around you. The goal is not to empty every shelf overnight, but to choose one corner, one drawer, or one small shelf where care and thought can make a difference. As we age, something subtle happens. We notice that light, order, and ease feel just as important as cherished memories. A daily habit, a weekly sweep, a mindful touch for each item instantly makes the home calmer, safer, and more welcoming. I invite you to try it, gently and without pressure. Which of these rules could you bring back today? Maybe it's the nightly sweep, or letting gifts find their true home, or simply giving attention to one small memory shelf. Share your own memories, your house rules, or little habits in the comments. I read every one and treasure each story. Tap like and subscribe so we can keep aging with wisdom, calm, and joy, one gentle step at a time. After 60, it becomes clear that living lightly doesn't mean giving up the past. It means making every day feel fuller, warmer, and naturally more peaceful. Thank you for listening to my grandmother's little rules. They remind us that it's never too late to live fully, tenderly, and lightly in the homes we love.